Husband stole my inheritance while on a business trip with his mistress, not knowing that I have. I was halfway through my morning espresso when the email changed everything. Just a simple notification. Really? Confirmation of transfer. $875,000 from an account I barely recognized to one I'd never seen before. The transaction details showed my name as the authorizer, except I hadn't authorized anything. I nearly knocked over my coffee cup, steadying it just in time to catch the drip traveling down the side. My name is Regina Jones, 32 sales manager at Prestige Dynamics, and until that very moment, I thought I had a solid marriage to Kyle, my husband of 8 years. The inheritance from Uncle Robert had arrived just 3 weeks earlier, money I'd planned to invest carefully. Maybe buy the lake house we'd always talked about. Establish some security for our future. I stared at the email, rereading it slowly as the world seemed to narrow around me. The transfer had been initiated last night at 10:43 p.m., when Kyle was supposedly at his company retreat in Denver. Except now, according to this confirmation, nearly all of Uncle Robert's inheritance, $875,000, had been moved to an offshore account with Kyle's name as the beneficiary. My fingers hovered over my phone. Call him, demand answers, cry, scream. Instead, I took a deep breath, placed my phone face down, and finished my coffee in silence. The quiet calm that settled over me wasn't shock, it was clarity, like a fog finally lifting after years of poor visibility. Because deep down, I already knew. I had always known. The signs had been there: Kyle's sudden interest in our finances after years of leaving everything to me. His mysterious weekend golf trips with clients who never seemed to materialize in our social circle. The way he'd been cataloging my supposed missteps in our marriage. 2 months ago, I found a draft email in our shared computer listing all the ways I had failed as a wife. I confronted him, and he brushed it off as a therapy exercise his friend had recommended. Just getting some feelings out, he'd said with that smile, the one that now, in retrospect, never quite reached his eyes. Nothing to worry about, Gina. I laughed softly, bitterly, at the kitchen counter. Kyle only called me Gina when he was lying. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint account. The inheritance money had been there yesterday now, just $762.38 remained. I checked our savings account, completely empty. Our investment portfolio. Access denied, password changed. My separate personal account with my own savings. Still intact. Thankfully. I'd always kept that one private. A habit from my single days that Kyle had called unnecessary and secretive. I took a screenshot of the transfer email and downloaded the bank statement showing the sudden disappearance of funds. Then I called our bank's fraud department. The representative, James, listened carefully to my explanation. Mrs. Jones, this transfer was authorized using your credentials. There's a verification code that was sent to your phone. I never received any code, I said, already scrolling through my messages. It was sent at 10:41 p.m. last night to your number ending in 4832. That wasn't my current number. It was my old one, the one I'd had 2 years ago. The phone Kyle had insisted on keeping as a backup in his desk drawer. That's not my current phone number, I said, my voice suddenly clinical, detached. That line was deactivated years ago. I see, James said slowly. In that case, I recommend you file a police report immediately. I'll put a temporary freeze on all your joint accounts. Thank you, I replied. And one more thing, can you tell me when the login credentials for the investment portfolio were changed? A few clicks, then. Yesterday afternoon at 4:17 p.m., right when Kyle's plane was supposedly taking off for Denver. I thanked James and ended the call. Then I sat still at my kitchen counter, watching dust particles dance in the morning sunlight filtering through the window. 8 years of marriage, and now this betrayal so calculated, it had to have been months in the making. My phone buzzed. A text from Kyle. Hey babe, just landed in Denver. Hotel has an amazing view. Miss you. How's everything at home? I stared at his message, a sudden laugh bubbling up inside me, not hysterical, just amused at the sheer audacity. He wasn't in Denver, he was somewhere with my inheritance, and he thought I was still completely in the dark. I typed back, "Everything's fine, just having coffee. House is so quiet without you." Deception for deception, it seemed only fair. Then I made 3 calls, first to my best friend and attorney, Vanessa, second to my financial advisor, Marcus, and third to the private investigator Vanessa had used during her own divorce 2 years ago. Because while Kyle thought he was playing chess, he had no idea I'd been studying the board for weeks.
Eh?
The pieces had started falling into place about 2 months earlier. I'd been promoted to senior sales manager at Prestige Dynamics, a significant step up that came with double the salary and equity options. That same week, Uncle Robert passed away unexpectedly, leaving me his estate, including substantial investments in cash. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was his legacy. His final act of love for the niece he'd helped raise after my parents died. "I'm so proud of you, Regina," Uncle Robert had told me during our last lunch together. "You've built yourself into exactly the woman I always knew you'd become." The inheritance news came 3 days after the funeral. Kyle's reaction had been strange quiet at first, then suddenly enthusiastic, talking about investments and opportunities, our future together. He started coming to my work functions, showing interest in my clients, scrolling through my emails when he thought I wasn't looking. One night, I came home early from a client dinner to find him on my laptop, clicking quickly away from something when I entered. "Just checking the weather," he'd said, flustered. "Big golf game tomorrow." Then came the subtle changes: Kyle's new expensive clothes, mysterious late-night calls he'd take outside, the way he'd started telling friends I was difficult at home while painting himself as the patient, long-suffering husband, the way his stories began featuring more about my supposed shortcomings, how I was essentially Regina from Mean Girls, how I was impossible to please, how I belittled him in front of others. None of it was true, but he'd say it with such convincing concern that even mutual friends started looking at me differently. Kyle was building a narrative. I realized one where he was the victim of a cold, career-obsessed wife. What I couldn't figure out was why, not until this morning, with the inheritance transfer notification glaring back at me from my screen. Vanessa arrived at my house within an hour, legal pad in hand, no-nonsense expression firmly in place. "Show me everything," she said, kicking off her heels and placing her briefcase on my kitchen island. I handed her my laptop with the email and bank statements. "He transferred $875,000 to an offshore account," I explained, using my old phone number for verification. Vanessa's eyebrows shot up. "That's not just theft, that's premeditated fraud." "There's more," I said, pulling out a folder. "Last month, I found these buried in his desk drawer." Inside were printouts of emails between Kyle and someone named Melissa, passionate exchanges discussing their future together, how they'd finally have enough to start over, how I wouldn't know what hit me. "How long?" Vanessa asked quietly. "The emails go back 7 months," I replied, right around when I was being considered for the promotion. Vanessa scanned the emails, her frown deepening. "This line here, 'Once ours uncle kicks it. We'll have everything we need. They were plotting around your inheritance.'" I nodded, surprising myself with how calm I felt. Kyle's known about Uncle Robert's estate plan for years. He just didn't know when he'd die. "And this Melissa, who is she?" "His administrative assistant at Walden Financial. They've worked together for 3 years. I paused. "She's been to our house for dinner parties." "Have you confronted him?" I shook my head. "He doesn't know that I know. He's still texting me from his business trip." Vanessa's eyes glinted with something like admiration. "Smart. What's your plan?" "That's why you're here," I said, taking a deep breath. "I need to know my options. Legally, financially, all of it. And then I need to make some moves of my own." She nodded, already jotting notes. "First, we document everything. Then we talk to Marcus about tracking that money. And then," she smiled grimly, "we make sure Kyle Jones regrets the day he decided to cross Regina Jones," as she outlined legal strategies. My phone buzzed again. Kyle had sent a selfie him in what looked like a hotel room, Denver skyline clearly visible through the window. Vanessa glanced at it and snorted. Nice try. That's a stock photo background. Look at the lighting, it doesn't match his face. I zoomed in. She was right. The window behind him was clearly photoshopped. I forwarded the image to my email without responding to him. He thinks I'm completely clueless, I said, a small smile forming. He has no idea who he's dealing with. No, Vanessa agreed, a matching smile spreading across her face. But he's about to find out. By evening, I had assembled my team: Vanessa for legal strategy, Marcus for financial recovery, and Diana Torres, the private investigator. Diana was all business, sharp eyes, sharper mind, and a quiet confidence that came from years of catching people at their worst. Based on his credit card activity, Diana explained, spreading documents across my dining room table. Your husband is not in Denver. He's in Turks and Caicos at the Palms Resort. With Melissa, I asked. Diana nodded, sliding over a photo taken from social media, Kyle and his assistant on a beach, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling broadly. The timestamp was from 3 hours ago. He flew out yesterday afternoon, first class. One-way tickets for both of them. Paid from an account under his name only at First Capital Bank. I'm still tracking when that account was opened. Marcus, my financial advisor, was simultaneously working on his laptop. I've got some news on the transfer, he said, looking up. The money hasn't fully cleared to the offshore account yet. International transfers of that size have holding periods. Can we stop it? I asked. Not directly, but the fraud report you filed this morning has already flagged it. The funds are in limbo, not in your account anymore, but not fully in his control either. Vanessa was reviewing the bank's fraud policies. Here's something interesting, she said. Your bank's policy specifies that fraudulent transfers initiated using compromised two-factor authentication are fully recoverable if reported within 24 hours. And I reported it within 12, I said. Vanessa nodded. Exactly. Plus, we have evidence he deliberately kept your old phone specifically to intercept verification codes. That's not just fraud, it's criminal. So what's our next step? I asked. We have several options, Vanessa replied. We could file for an emergency injunction to freeze all assets while pursuing criminal charges. That would certainly get his attention. But that alerts him immediately, Diana cautioned. Right now, your advantage is that he thinks you're oblivious, Marcus agreed. If he realizes you're onto him, he might try to move whatever money he does control even further out of reach. I considered this, drumming my fingers lightly on the table. I don't want him to know I'm aware until I've secured everything I can. What if we let him think his plan is working while we quietly build the case? A slow smile spread across Vanessa's face. Keep playing the unsuspecting wife while we set the trap, I like it. Besides, Diana added, I need more time to gather evidence on his relationship with Melissa and any other accounts he might have hidden. I nodded decisively. Then that's the plan. I continue communicating normally. I don't change any routines. I don't confront him about anything. Meanwhile, we work behind the scenes to secure the inheritance, document the fraud, and prepare for divorce proceedings. And when he returns, Vanessa asked. I met her gaze steadily. That's when we spring the trap. The next morning, Kyle texted again, offering details about a fictional conference dinner and asking how I was doing. I responded with cheerful banality, mentioning a lunch meeting with clients and asking when he'd be home. Sunday evening, he replied. Conference ends Saturday, but I've got a meeting in Chicago on the way back. Miss you? I swallowed the bitter laugh and texted back. Miss you too, can't wait to see you. I'm thinking of looking at lake houses next week. Uncle Robert's inheritance just cleared. The response took longer this time. Finally, sounds great, babe. Let's talk when I'm home. Love you. I set down the phone and looked up at Diana, who had been watching the exchange. He's panicking, she said. He knows the inheritance is gone, and now he has to figure out how to explain that to you when he returns. He's going to create some kind of emergency, I predicted. Something that forced him to use the money. Probably a story about being threatened or blackmailed. Classic, Diana agreed. Meanwhile, I found something interesting about Melissa. She opened her laptop and showed me a series of social media profiles. She's not just his assistant. She's changed her identity several times in the past decade. Previous name, Melissa Winters. Before that, Melanie Winston. Why the changes? Because Melanie Winston has a record charged with fraud in 2016 after helping her previous boyfriend empty his wife's accounts during a divorce. Charges were eventually dropped when the wife declined to testify. So this is her pattern, I said, the pieces clicking into place. Find vulnerable married men, become the supportive other woman, help them steal from their wives, then vanish with the money, Diana finished. I found 2 other men who reported similar stories after getting involved with her. She's good, always makes sure the men do the actual stealing so her hands stay clean. I shook my head, almost admiring the calculated precision of it all. Kyle thinks he's running off into the sunset with her, but she's just using him. Exactly, Diana said, and he's so blinded by his own insecurities that he can't see it. Kyle's insecurities. There were so many of them, carefully hidden beneath his confident exterior. His terror of being outshined professionally, his obsession with how others perceived him, the way he flinched whenever anyone referenced my family's academic accomplishments, the night sweats he'd get before business presentations, his constant need for affirmation. I had spent years reassuring him, building him up, never flaunting my own successes, and in return, he had systematically targeted my inheritance and worked to destroy my reputation at the same time. I want everything, I said suddenly, a cold certainty washing over me. Not out of greed, but because he doesn't get to profit from hurting me, not a single penny. Diana smiled. Then let's make sure he doesn't. By Friday, our preparations were complete, with Marcus's help. The bank had confirmed the fraudulent nature of the transfer. The money would be returned to a new, secure account in my name only within 5 to 7 business days. Diana had compiled extensive evidence of Kyle's affair with Melissa, including their previous financial activities together, and Vanessa had prepared divorce papers citing financial misconduct, fraud, and adultery. But the most interesting discovery came from Kyle's workplace. Through a discreet contact at Walden Financial, Diana learned that Kyle had been spreading elaborate lies about me to his colleagues for months. He's created an entire fictional version of you, Diana explained, showing me statements from his coworkers. According to Kyle, you're emotionally abusive, irrational, possibly suffering from borderline personality disorder. And my personal favorite, exactly like Regina from Mean Girls, but worse. Despite everything, I laughed. I've never even seen that movie. He's told everyone you belittle him constantly, make him sleep on the couch, and mock his career choices. Meanwhile, I've been the primary income earner for the past 3 years while he's been developing his client base, I said, making air quotes. Diana nodded. But the worst part is this. She slid over a folder containing printed emails from Kyle to his boss. He's created fake evidence suggesting you've been cheating on him with clients. I flipped through the pages, stunned to see fabricated text exchanges and doctored photos placing me in compromising positions with men I barely knew professionally. These are completely manufactured, I whispered. I know, Diana said gently. The Photoshop work is amateur at best, but he's been using these to build sympathy at work, positioning himself for compassionate leave and possibly financial support from colleagues. The calculated nature of the deception made my stomach turn. This wasn't just about the money or the affair. Kyle had been methodically destroying my reputation behind my back while painting himself as the victim. He's been laying the groundwork for the eventual story he'll tell everyone, I realized. After stealing my inheritance, he planned to leave me and tell the world I cheated on him, treated him terribly, and deserved to be left with nothing. Vanessa, who had been reviewing the legal documents, looked up. Which makes our approach even clearer. When he returns, we don't just confront him about the money, we expose the entire web of lies. But not emotionally, I decided, strength solidifying in my voice. Not with accusations and tears, that would just reinforce the crazy wife narrative he's created. So how do you want to handle it? Diana asked. A slow smile spread across my face as the perfect plan crystallized in my mind, with absolute, unquestionable proof and an audience. Sunday evening arrived with a theatrical perfection thunderstorms forecast just as Kyle's flight was scheduled to land. I'd spent the day preparing house clean to immaculate standards, his favorite dinner in the oven, a bottle of expensive wine breathing on the counter, the scene of an oblivious, welcoming wife. Meanwhile, in our home office, Vanessa waited with Diana and Marcus. The dining room had been subtly rearranged, additional chairs brought in, documents organized in labeled folders on the sideboard, recording equipment discreetly placed. At 7:36 p.m., headlights swept across the driveway. I smoothed my dress, a new purchase, elegant black with subtle red accents, and checked my reflection. Calm, composed, in control. The front door opened. "Honey, I'm home," Kyle called out, his voice artificially cheerful. "Sorry about the rain, traffic was a nightmare from the airport." I stepped into the hallway, smile perfectly in place. "Welcome back, how was Denver?" He set down his suitcase, shaking water from his coat. "Productive, lots of networking, some promising leads." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, and I allowed it, noting the unfamiliar cologne clinging to his skin. "Dinner's almost ready," I said, turning toward the kitchen. "Why don't you get settled, and I'll pour the wine." "Sounds perfect." He loosened his tie, looking relieved at my apparent normality. "Actually, Gina, there's something important we should discuss, about Uncle Robert's inheritance." "Oh!" I kept my voice light. "What about it?" Kyle's expression shifted to practiced concern. "I got some disturbing news during the trip. There might be," he paused dramatically, "an issue with the bank, some suspicious activity." I widened my eyes in manufactured worry. "What kind of suspicious activity?" "Let me get changed first," he deflected. "Then we'll sit down and go through everything. It's complicated." He grabbed his suitcase and headed upstairs, no doubt to prepare his fabricated explanation. I returned to the kitchen, sent a quick text to Vanessa. "He's here," starting his story about the money, and poured 2 glasses of wine. By the time Kyle came downstairs in fresh clothes, I had placed the wine glasses on the dining room table. "Something smells great," he said. Entering the dining room before stopping abruptly, his eyes darted to the extra chairs, the folders, the formal setup of what should have been a casual welcome home dinner. "What's all this?" he asked, wariness creeping into his voice. I smiled, gesturing for him to sit. "I thought we should be comfortable for this discussion about Uncle Robert's inheritance. It sounds important." He hesitated, then took a seat, reaching immediately for the wine. "Like I was saying, there's been some concerning activity with the bank. I got a call during my trip." "From Denver," I interrupted pleasantly. "Yes," he answered too quickly. "From the financial security team. They said there might have been unauthorized access to our accounts." I nodded thoughtfully. "That's strange. From Denver? Or was it from Turks and Caicos, the Palms Resort, specifically room 418? Kyle's face drained of color, the wine glass freezing halfway to his lips. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your actual location for the past 4 days, I said calmly, reaching for the first folder. "I'm talking about the $875,000 you transferred from my inheritance using my old phone number for verification. I'm talking about Melissa Winters, or should I say, Melanie Winston, and your plan to disappear with my money." His expression cycled through shock, denial, and finally calculation, setting down his wineglass. He attempted a confused laugh. "Regina, you're not making sense. I was in Denver for a conference. I don't know what you think." "No more lies, Kyle," I said, sliding a photo across the table, him and Melissa on the beach, time-stamped. "This is from Thursday. Not very Denver-like weather." He stared at the photo, mind visibly racing to formulate a response. "I can explain." "Actually," I said, checking my watch, "I think it's time for some other voices in this conversation." On cue. The office door opened. Vanessa entered first, followed by Diana and Marcus. Kyle's face contorted in confusion. "What is this? Why are these people in our house?" His voice rose, indignation his first refuge. "Kyle, you remember my friend Vanessa Chen?" I said pleasantly. "She's also a lawyer specializing in fraud and divorce. This is Marcus Henley, my financial advisor, and Diana Torres, private investigator." Vanessa sat down directly across from Kyle. "Mr. Jones, we've documented your transfer of $875,000 from your wife's inheritance using fraudulently obtained authentication credentials. We've frozen the offshore account you attempted to move the funds to. We've compiled evidence of your affair with Melissa Winters, including hotel receipts, photographs, and witness statements. Kyle's face flickered between expressions panic, anger, calculation. This is ridiculous, Regina. You're making a scene over nothing. I was going to tell you. About the money? I asked. Or about the fabricated evidence suggesting I've been cheating on you with clients? He paled further, glancing at the folders. Diana spoke next, her voice professional. We've obtained copies of emails you sent to colleagues containing photoshopped images of your wife with other men. We've also collected statements from your coworkers detailing the fictitious abuse allegations you've made against Mrs. Jones. Marcus added, the bank has already confirmed the fraudulent nature of the transfer. The funds will be returned to Mrs. Jones's new account within days. Kyle's shock gave way to desperate anger. You went through my private communications. You spied on me. That's illegal. This is exactly what I've been telling everyone you're controlling. Obsessive. Paranoid. I remained perfectly calm. No, Kyle, I received evidence of your theft and infidelity, and I took reasonable steps to protect myself. That's not paranoia, that's self-preservation. He turned to Vanessa, attempting to establish an ally. You don't understand what she's like when we're alone. The constant criticism, the cold shoulder. She emasculates me. She created a fictional version of her to justify your actions, Vanessa finished. We've heard the stories you've been telling, Mr. Jones. They don't align with reality. Reality, Kyle scoffed, growing louder. Reality is, I've been trapped in a loveless marriage with a woman who's never satisfied, who looks down on me, who has supported you financially for 3 years while you pursued your career growth, I interjected. Who cheered at every small victory, who never once mentioned that her salary covered 70% of our expenses, who defended you to her friends when they questioned why you couldn't hold a client base. This is exactly what I mean, he shouted, gesturing wildly, twisting everything, making me look like a failure. I shook my head slowly. No one here called you a failure, Kyle. That's your insecurity talking. The only failure was your attempt to steal my inheritance money that represents the final gift from the man who raised me after my parents died. Something in my tone, the quiet dignity, perhaps seemed to penetrate his defensive rage. He slumped slightly in his chair. What do you want? He finally asked. Vanessa slid a document across the table. Divorce papers citing financial misconduct and adultery. Mrs. Jones is willing to proceed without pushing for criminal charges under certain conditions. Criminal charges. He looked genuinely shocked. Wire fraud exceeding $500,000 carries a potential sentence of up to 20 years, Vanessa stated flatly. That's before we add identity theft, misuse of authentication credentials, and conspiracy. Kyle's eyes widened, his breathing becoming shallow. This is blackmail. No, I corrected gently. This is a courtesy. You can sign these papers agreeing to a clean dissolution of our marriage, with all assets returned to their rightful owners, or we can proceed through the courts with full disclosure of your activities. Your choice. His gaze darted between us, calculating odds, searching for leverage. And if I refuse, Diana placed a slim folder on the table. Then the evidence goes to the police, the district attorney, your employer, and the board of financial advisors that licenses you to practice. Kyle's professional reputation had always been his most prized possession. The threat of losing it combined with potential criminal charges visibly deflated him. Let me see the papers, he muttered, as he reviewed the divorce agreement. I observed him carefully, this man I had loved, trusted, built a life with. His handsome features now seemed petty somehow, his confident demeanor revealed as a paper-thin facade covering deep insecurities. These terms, he finally said, they let me keep my personal accounts and vehicle. Yes, I confirmed. I'm not interested in taking everything from you, Kyle. I just want what's rightfully mine. He looked up, genuine confusion crossing his face. Why aren't you screaming at me? Why aren't you falling apart? That's what you told everyone I would do, I finished. Because that was never who I was. That was the fictional Regina you created to justify your betrayal. Something like shame flickered across his face before being quickly replaced by resentment. So, you get to look like the bigger person while I lose everything. You're not losing everything, I pointed out. You're keeping your job. Your reputation provided you sign those papers and whatever you earned legitimately. What you don't get is my inheritance or the satisfaction of destroying me in the process." Kyle stared at me for a long moment, then picked up the pen. His signature was shaky but clear across each marked line. When he finished, Vanessa collected the documents while Marcus and Diana gathered their evidence folders. "What happens now?" Kyle asked, suddenly looking lost. "Now you pack a bag with essentials," I said. "The papers give you 48 hours to remove your personal belongings from the house. I've arranged for you to stay at the Marriott downtown for 2 weeks paid in advance while you find new accommodations." "You're kicking me out tonight in this storm." "Yes," I said simply. "Your choices have consequences. Kyle, this is one of them." He stood slowly, defeated in a way I'd never seen before. "And Melissa?" "Already left the country," Diana informed him. "Boarded a flight to Belize this morning, alone." Kyle's face crumpled slightly at this final betrayal. Without another word, he went upstairs to pack. 20 minutes later, he returned with a suitcase and duffel bag. At the front door, he paused, turning to face me one last time. "I really did love you once," he said quietly. I met his gaze steadily. "I know, and that makes what you did even worse." After his car disappeared down the rain-slicked street, Vanessa squeezed my shoulder. "You did beautifully. Not many people could have remained so composed." "It doesn't feel like a victory," I admitted. "Just an ending." "Not an ending," she corrected. "A transition, and based on how you handled this, I'd say your future is looking bright." 6 months later, I stood at the podium, surveying the gathered crowd. The Robert Sullivan Foundation for Orphaned Children was officially launching, and as its founder and director, I was expected to say a few words. "My Uncle Robert believed that loss doesn't have to define us," I began, my voice steady despite the emotion rising in my throat. "He showed me that family isn't just about blood, it's about who steps up when the world falls apart." In the audience, I spotted Vanessa with her husband, Diana chatting quietly with Marcus, and several of my colleagues from Prestige Dynamics, where I'd recently been promoted to Vice President of Client Relations. "This foundation will provide educational support, mental health resources, and community for children who have lost their parents," I continued, "because everyone deserves someone who puts their welfare first, who protects their interests, who fights for their future." I didn't mention Kyle or the divorce that had been finalized 3 months earlier. I didn't need to. This foundation, funded by the very inheritance he had tried to steal, was my response to his betrayal. Not vengeance, but purpose. Not destruction, but creation. After the speeches and champagne toast, Vanessa found me by the window overlooking the city lights. "Quite a transformation," she observed, "from discovering his betrayal to creating all this in half a year." I smiled. "Uncle Robert always said crisis reveals character. I think he would have approved of how this turned out." "And Kyle, have you heard anything?" "Diana keeps me updated," I admitted. "He's moved to Phoenix, trying to rebuild his client base. Apparently, he's telling a new version of our story, one where we grew apart and decided to pursue different paths." Vanessa snorted. "Revising history again, some people never learn." "Maybe not," I agreed, "but I did." Later that night, I stood on my balcony, wine glass in hand, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Betrayal leaves scars that fade but never vanish. But it no longer defined me. I thought about the fictional Regina that Kyle had created in his mind, cold, calculating, cruel, in his desperation to justify his actions. He had constructed an enemy that never existed. The irony wasn't lost on me in trying to destroy me financially and reputationally. He had inadvertently helped me discover strengths I never knew I possessed. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the night sky, to Uncle Robert, to the woman I had become in the aftermath of betrayal. The inheritance Kyle had tried to steal had become something far more valuable than money. It had become my foundation, my purpose, my new beginning. And that was something no one could ever take from me.